After getting out of the military, Yeon-ho moved back near his old school and started getting used to living on his own again. To cover his living expenses, he decided to pick up some tutoring work. He worked with a lot of different families, but there was one student who really stuck in his memory. She lived in one of those high-end apartment complexes. Yeon-ho rings the doorbell for his session. He announces himself through the intercom, letting her know the tutor is here. Ahn Ji-hye greets him with a huge, energetic smile the second she opens the door. He started tutoring her when she was just a first year in middle school. She was smart, polite, and actually seemed to enjoy the lessons. The girl was a straight-A student with enough academic awards to cover a wall. She was basically a dream to teach. But despite how perfect she seemed, something about her situation always felt a little off to him. Her parents were never around. Most of the time, the only sign of them was a sticky note on a coffee cup. He'd been teaching Ji-hye for a long time, but he could count the number of times he'd actually met her parents on one hand. After wrapping up a lesson, he gives her the usual praise for doing a good job. She hesitates for a second, looking like she has something on her mind. She starts fidgeting with her fingers, looking a bit shy. Ji-hye asks if he has any plans, wondering if he wants to stay and have some cake with her. It was pretty obvious that she got lonely easily and just wanted some company after class. He agrees to stay, and her face immediately lights up. She's so excited she practically runs to the kitchen. If he didn't have anywhere else to be, he'd usually stick around for a bit. They'd chat about school and random stuff. Just having someone to talk to seemed to make her day. Yeon-ho felt for her, seeing how much she struggled with being alone all the time. This became their routine for about a year and a half, until things suddenly changed. He gets a call from Ji-hye's mother, who sounds as busy as ever. The tutoring sessions were coming to an end. This was going to be their last month together. The family was moving to a better school district. Yeon-ho was disappointed, but he knew it was coming. But his disappointment was nothing compared to how Ji-hye felt. She looked completely crushed. Yeon-ho wondered if parting ways with a tutor was really worth all those tears. He thanks her for being such a great student and always doing her homework. He points out that she still looks pretty upset about the whole thing. She tries to deny it, but it's written all over her face. To cheer her up, he offers to give her a tour of his university campus for their final meeting. The offer works like magic. She's instantly back to her usual, excited self. They spend the day walking around the campus, with Yeon-ho showing her all the spots. Ji-hye's having a blast, posing for pictures and taking in the college atmosphere. They sit down for some canned coffee, and she jokes about wanting the full college experience. Next up on the tour is getting some actual food. They end up at a pizza place, and she's practically inhaling her slice. She's over the moon, telling him he's the absolute best. He's just glad she's smiling again. He officially thanks her for being such a hard-working student for the past year and a half. Yeon-ho tells her she's a bright kid and that she'll definitely do great at her new school. He makes her a promise. Once she turns 20 and becomes an amazing adult, he'll buy her a proper, delicious meal. She beams, absolutely loving the idea of that future promise. At that moment, the future looked bright for both of them. They clinked their glasses of soda, sealing their final meeting with a toast. Even on the very last day, Ji-hye's mother was full of thanks for everything he'd done for her daughter. She kept telling him how much she appreciated him teaching Ji-hye all that time. Yeon-ho just laughed it off, saying Ji-hye was so smart that his job was actually pretty easy. He was sure she wouldn't have any trouble getting into a top university. The sun was starting to set, so it was finally time for them to head back and say their goodbyes. Young Ji-hye waved goodbye with a huge smile, making him promise that they'd meet again someday. He waved back, thinking that was the end of that chapter of his life. Looking back on it now, he realized that tutoring was actually one of the best decisions he'd ever made. After he finally graduated from university himself, things didn't go exactly as planned. He spent a long time getting rejected by one company after another, staring at "we're sorry to inform you" messages on his phone. He spent weeks agonizing over what he was actually going to do for a living. Then, he suddenly remembered how much he enjoyed teaching those kids back when he was tutoring. That realization motivated him to pursue a real teaching career. And before he knew it, he'd landed a job at Hanbit Prep Academy. Fast forward to today, and he's a full-blown prep school instructor. He's charismatic and knows how to keep his students in line while making sure they actually learn something. The job has its rough days, but the sense of accomplishment he gets from seeing his students succeed is worth it. Back in the day, he didn't really have any big dreams or ambitions. But now, he's fully committed to becoming a top-tier, star instructor. Overall, he was pretty satisfied with how his life was turning out. He gets a text from one of his former students, Jin-ho, who just got into a great university. He realizes that kids born in 2006 are already old enough to be in college. That thought makes him feel ancient. He starts doing the math in his head. If those kids are in college, then Ji-hye should be old enough to be in college too. He wonders where that smart middle schooler ended up. He's curious, but he figures it'd be too weird to just text her out of the blue after 4 years of silence. Just as he's thinking that, his phone pings with a new message. He takes a closer look, and his heart almost stops. The message is from Ahn Ji-hye herself. She's asking if he remembers the promise they made. She sounds desperate, begging him to meet her at Ojeom Station as soon as possible. All those faded memories start rushing back as he stands there in the falling snow. He remembers that promise to buy her a meal once she became an amazing adult. He arrives at the station and texts her, wondering why on earth she picked such a freezing, snowy day for this. It's been 4 years, so he's imagining she must have turned into a refined, elegant young lady by now. He hears a voice call out his name, but it doesn't sound like what he expected. He turns around and comes face to face with a girl who looks nothing like the Ji-hye he remembers. Yeon-ho is completely speechless, just staring at her in shock. She's got teal and pink hair peeking out from her hoodie. And her ears are loaded with industrial piercings and hoops. This was definitely not the amazing adult he'd envisioned. She's shivering uncontrollably in the cold, wearing nothing but a hoodie and shorts in the middle of a blizzard. Yeon-ho is so blindsided, he can barely process that this is the same girl. He tries to play it cool and says it's great to see her, nodding that she even remembered their old promise. Ji-hye just looks down at her feet, sounding really guilty about the whole thing. She tells him she's sorry about that promise. Yeon-ho asks her if she got into a good college, thinking it was finally that time of year. He even brags a bit about how he's now big-shot prep school instructor in Bangi. But Ji-hye's next words completely floor him. She reveals that she actually dropped out of high school. She starts sobbing, saying she wanted to wait until she became an amazing adult to contact him, but she failed. She gets even more emotional, blaming him for everything that's happened to her. She shouts that if he hadn't made that promise and filled her head with dreams, she would have just lived a normal life. Yeon-ho is totally overwhelmed. He tries to get her to calm down so they can actually talk. She keeps repeating that it's all his fault. Then she suddenly grabs him and buries her face in his chest, demanding that he take responsibility for her. The tears won't stop as she lets out all the pain she's been holding in. Yeon-ho is standing there, stunned. He has no idea what she's been through, but he can feel her resentment. One thing is clear. She's at her breaking point and desperately needs someone to lean on. She apologizes for springing this on him out of nowhere. She admits she was pathetic, but felt she didn't have any other choice but to find him. Despite how she looks now, she says she knew he wouldn't abandon her. She looks up at him with those pleading, tearful eyes, leaving Yeon-ho completely at a loss for words. Just then, a very loud, very awkward stomach growl cuts through the dramatic moment. The silence that follows is deafening. Ji-hye is absolutely mortified. She awkwardly mumbles something about needing meat, breaking the heavy tension. Yeon-ho decides to take her to a restaurant. Looking at the bill, it's clear she hasn't eaten in a long time. Ji-hye is finally looking like herself again, after scarfing down a hot meal. Now that she's finished eating, Yeon-ho decides it's time to get some real answers. He looks at her suitcase and asks if she ran away from home. Ji-hye immediately denies it. She corrects him, saying she didn't run away, she got kicked out of her apartment. Yeon-ho is shocked. What did you do? She insists she had her reasons and starts getting defensive again. She takes a deep breath, wondering where to even start explaining the mess her life has become. This is the story of Ji-hye's disaster diary. It turns out she moved out the moment she turned 20 to get away from her family. But as it turns out, knowing how to study doesn't mean you know how to survive in the real world. She was terrible at every part-time job she tried. She was so bad that she even managed to get yelled at for pouring diesel into a regular car at a gas station. When rent day finally arrived, she looked at her bank account and realized she only had about $3 left. She completely panicked. She was a total wreck and couldn't even bring herself to talk to her landlady about the situation. Instead, she just ignored all the texts. Eventually, the landlady came knocking on her door, sounding more and more concerned. She even tried to open the door, asking Ji-hye if something had happened. Ji-hye was hiding under her covers, too embarrassed to even face her. She eventually apologized and promised to pay, but the landlady said she didn't even want the rent. She just wanted Ji-hye to go to church with her. At first, Ji-hye thought she was being saved by the landlady's kindness. But then, a much bigger problem arose. The Eternal Life Jesus Church wasn't exactly what you'd call a normal church. It looked more like a massive corporation. Ji-hye started to get a really bad feeling about this, wondering if she'd accidentally joined a cult. The landlady quickly dismissed her concerns, saying Ji-hye had just been misled by weird documentaries on Netflix. Ji-hye was completely out of her element and didn't know what to do. Next thing she knows, she's being shoved in front of the congregation and asked to share her thoughts on her first service. Standing there with a microphone, Ji-hye is completely frozen. She has absolutely no idea what to say. Finally having a microphone in her hand, she didn't know what else to say besides the cold, hard truth. God is dead, you idiots. The church leader behind her looks like he's about to have a heart attack. Needless to say, she didn't last long there. She was told to pack her things and leave within 3 days. And just like that, she ended up on the streets with nothing but a suitcase. Yeon-ho is still trying to process everything she's told him. He notices she's barely wearing any layers and asks why she's dressed so lightly in this cold weather. Ji-hye admits she had to sell her last jacket online just to afford some food. He puts his hand to his chin, trying to summarize the absolute chaos that has become her life. He looks at her and asks the obvious question. She doesn't have a place to stay tonight, does she? Ji-hye gives him a sheepish, hopeful look. When he doesn't immediately offer his place, she starts getting anxious, asking why he's staying so quiet. Suddenly, she starts looking at him with these big, sparkling puppy dog eyes, which only makes Yeon-ho more flustered. He tells her to stop it immediately. Ji-hye starts pleading with him, saying she'd be fine sleeping on some old newspapers in the corner of his room. Yeon-ho shouts back that her comfort isn't the issue here. He tells her flat out that staying at his place is completely out of the question. He offers to get her a motel room for old time's sake, but Ji-hye is terrified of being alone in an unfamiliar place. Yeon-ho tries to explain that a man and a woman living together is a lot more complicated than she thinks. He asks her if this means she's really going to be sleeping on the streets tonight. As a last resort, he suggests that she should at least try contacting her parents. Ji-hye's expression immediately darkens. She tells him to not even bring them up, her tone cold and final. Yeon-ho is taken aback by her sudden change in demeanor. She looks him dead in the eye and says those people aren't even her parents in the first place. A dark, heavy aura seems to surround her. Yeon-ho is genuinely intimidated, sensing an almost literal killing intent coming from her. He quickly tries to backtrack. Ji-hye quickly apologizes for getting so intense all of a sudden. She looks down, her voice trembling. She tells him she really can't go back there. She says that living under the same roof as people like that would make her feel like she was suffocating to death. Yeon-ho feels a pang of guilt. He wonders what kind of conflict could have been so bad that she wanted to cut ties with her family completely. Even so, he still doesn't feel right about her sleeping outside. She reaches out and gently grabs his hand, whispering his name. She promises she won't be a burden and practically begs him to let her stay. Her desperation is plain to see on her face. Yeon-ho stays silent for a long time, looking at her with a complicated expression. Then he pulls his hand away and gives her a firm no. Ji-hye's heart sinks. He tells her it might sound awkward, but two adults of the opposite sex living together is just asking for trouble and would be uncomfortable for both of them. Ji-hye is stunned into silence. She looks at him, her eyes wide with shock and disappointment as he suggests one more time that she just go back to her parents. Ji-hye suddenly stands up, her face a mask of disappointment. She thanks him for the meal and says they should go. Yeon-ho can only offer a weak, confused response as he follows her out. Snow drifts down over a silent, frozen city. Yeon-ho calls out to Ji-hye, confused why she's just walking away and leaving her suitcase behind. He chases after her, yelling for her to stop and grab her stuff. Ji-hye spins around, her eyes wide and desperate, and tells him she's just going to die. Yeon-ho snaps, telling her to stop talking nonsense and to stop throwing around words like dying. He can't believe someone as young as her is already talking like her life is over. Ji-hye shoots back that it's his fault for telling her to go back to her parents. She breaks down, crying that she'd rather die outside than suffocate in that house again. Yeon-ho stands there, the weight of her words sinking in as the snow falls around them. He sighs and gives in, telling her she wins and to just come back to his place. They wait at the bus stop, where Ji-hye is shivering. Yeon-ho can't help but nag her for choosing cold noodles in this weather. Looking at her, he realizes he has no idea what she's been through during the years they were apart. Ji-hye looks completely unstable, huddled over her suitcase in the freezing wind. She's vibrating from the cold, her teeth probably chattering. Yeon-ho drapes his heavy coat over her shoulders before she catches a cold. Ji-hye looks up, surprised by the gesture, and quietly thanks him. She asks if he'll be okay without it, but he insists he can handle a little chill. He tells her she'll be the one freezing if she doesn't keep it on. Suddenly, she's all smiles, asking if he wants a hug to stay warm until the bus arrives. Yeon-ho panics, pushing her back and telling her to just behave and wait for the bus. They finally make it back to his apartment building, standing tall against the night sky. Once inside, Yeon-ho collapses onto his sofa, completely drained by the night's events. He stares into space, wondering if taking in his former student was actually a huge mistake. From the bathroom, the sound of the shower starts echoing through the quiet apartment. Hot water hits the floor as steam begins to fill the room. Ji-hye lets the warmth soak in, looking like it's the first bit of comfort she's had in ages. Out in the living room, Yeon-ho is still overthinking everything, wondering how this is going to end. He decides it's time for a talk and asks her what her plans are for the future. Ji-hye sits on the floor in one of his oversized shirts, looking surprisingly innocent. Yeon-ho crosses his arms, telling her he hopes she isn't planning to just mooch off him forever. Ji-hye leaps up, announcing she's actually prepared her dazzlingly bright life plan. Plan 1 is basically gold farming in an RPG. Yeon-ho kills the idea instantly, pointing out the electricity bill alone would cost more than she'd make. Plan 2 is scalping concert tickets with macros. Yeon-ho shuts that down too, telling her it's just wrong. Her final, brilliant idea is taking her security deposit money and gambling it all at the racetrack. Yeon-ho loses it, screaming at her to just go out and get a normal job. Ji-hye whines that she's already tried and got rejected by everyone, so she just wanted to figure things out for a bit. When he asks how long a bit means, she casually suggests 3 years. Yeon-ho lays down the law. She has 2 weeks to find a part-time job or she's out on the street. He reminds her how much those short ribs he bought her cost when she calls him heartless. The apartment goes quiet as the night settles in. Ji-hye is out cold the second her head hits the pillow, clutching a stuffed animal like a lifeline. Yeon-ho stands over her with some blankets, thinking that despite the chaos, she must have had a really long day. Yeon-ho sits in bed clutching a pillow, lost in thought after Ji-hye crashed at his place. He remembers her tearful face at the station and realizes she definitely holds a grudge against him. Staring at the ceiling, he wonders if he said something that really messed her up back then. Morning hits the apartment building, casting a cold light over the city. Ji-hye wakes up with a massive yawn, still hugging her bunny plushie. She's surprised to see Yeon-ho already up and moving. He tells her he's heading to work and reminds her not to turn the place into a dump while he's gone. He asks if she still likes shredded dried squid, and the question catches her off guard. He mentions there's some in the fridge and heads out, leaving her sitting there in silence. The door locks with a click as he leaves for the day. Ji-hye peeks out from the room, making sure the coast is clear. She sits down for breakfast and thinks that while Yeon-ho seems a bit stiffer than he used to be, he's still the same guy deep down. She starts on the dishes, determined not to be a complete burden on him. Checking her phone, she tells herself she needs to start pulling her own weight to repay his kindness. Fast forward 11 days, and Ji-hye is lying in bed feeling like a total piece of trash. Yeon-ho comes home with sushi, and Ji-hye gets excited before her self-loathing kicks in, thinking she doesn't deserve such luxury. Over dinner, she admits she sent out tons of resumes, but only one convenience store even called her. Yeon-ho wonders if the job market is really that brutal, or if she's just applying to the wrong places. When she mentions she only wants jobs with AC and heating, Yeon-ho's eyes twitch as he contemplates kicking her out right then. He tells her he gets that she's desperate, but she needs to stop being so uptight during interviews. Ji-hye looks at him with a mix of hope and sadness as he tells her he knows she can do it. She cheers up instantly, promising him she'll definitely land a job this time. Meanwhile, over at Hanbit Prep Academy, the workday is in full swing. Yeon-ho is at the staff meeting, looking professional and ready to get through the notices. Team leader Kang Yumin takes over, briefing everyone on the upcoming parent sessions. She mentions they need a new grading assistant soon, but she's interrupted by Yeon-ho's phone going off. It won't stop dinging, and Yeon-ho quickly tries to apologize for forgetting to mute it. He checks the screen and is horrified to see 87 missed messages from Ji-hye in just a few minutes. He scrolls through her texts as she begs him not to abandon her after another rejection. Ji-hye is completely spiraling in the chat, terrified that he's going to kick her out like he threatened. As the sun sets behind his apartment building, her name is still the only thing on his mind. Back at the flat, Ji-hye's phone lies on the floor next to her as she wallows in depression. She, curled up on the tiles, crying because she only has 2 days left before her deadline is up. A sudden notification sound makes her jump. She scrambles for the phone, seeing that Yeon-ho finally replied to her barrage of texts. He just tells her he's busy and will message her after he's done with work. Ji-hye stares at the screen, hurt by how cold his tone seems. She's convinced he's finally gotten sick of her and is ready to show her the door. Feeling completely alone, she rolls onto her back and stares at her phone. She pulls up her social media and types out a desperate plea for help to her few followers. She's basically begging for anyone to just say one kind thing to her so she doesn't lose it. Suddenly, another notification pops up on her screen. A reply from a user named Minzombie pops up on Ji-hye's post, telling her not to be so hard on herself and that she'll find a better place to work soon. Ji-hye lies on the floor, grinning at the screen and thinking that Min-zombie is always there to cheer her up when she's down. Back at the prep academy, the office is quiet as the shift ends for the day. Kang Yumin sits back in her office chair, nodding that Yeon-ho has been rushing home. The second class ends lately. Yeon-ho gives her a sheepish smile, making up an excuse about having some personal things to take care of. Sipping her coffee, Yumin reminds him to keep his phone on silent to avoid any complaints from the students' parents. As he heads for the door, she tells him to get home safely and asks him to keep an ear out for anyone who might want a job as a grading assistant. The mention of the job opening stops Yeon-ho in his tracks, and he turns back with a sudden thought. Meanwhile, Ji-hye is back on the floor at the apartment, sniffing back tears as she counts down the minutes until he gets home. She jumps when she hears the front door finally unlock. She greets him with a shaky voice, trying to gauge his mood as he takes off his coat. Playing with her fingers, she starts apologizing for the barrage of messages and for failing her interview again today. Ji-hye looks up at him, her face full of guilt as she waits for the inevitable lecture about her deadline. Instead, Yeon-ho looks at her and asks if she'd be interested in taking a part-time job at the academy where he works. Ji-hye's eyes go wide with shock as the idea of being a grading assistant slowly sinks in.